Hello. I'm ready. Office hour number 5, I think. Yes, I'm a little late today, but better late than never. And today's theme is actually based on a few conversations I had in the past few days. These were conversations in my retreat, a mini retreat that I had, which if you're in the area, you're more welcome to come. December 7th is our last one for 2024, so do not forget about that one. And then it also came up in a soccer game this past weekend that I attended. So I want to start by talking about positive and negative. First and foremost, these lights that are shining on me right now, my phone, and many other things that are driven by energy would not function without positive and negative energy. So just like that, we as humans can also not function with just positive or just negative thoughts. And any kind of action, positive, negative, right? And so that's where I want to begin, is that there are things in our lives that require both. And it's for us to figure out how can we cope with both. Because usually we rather focus on the positive things. We rather focus on the things that work well. And we only want to have sunshine. And for those who live where I live, who haven't had a rainy day in a very long time, or at least so brief that you can't count it as a rainy day, know that just sunshine is not going to feel as good for nature. And even us, we feel like dried up, like literally. So with that said, we just want to recognize that when things happen that we are maybe not so fond of, that are maybe related to negative things, or more so things that feel uncomfortable, that is important. And same just like stress. It's not that we want to have a stress-free life. It's just that we don't want life to only be stressful. So some stress, which we can consider as negative, can be good. So we just have to figure out how those two, the positive and the negative, help each other out. So that I'm not just on cloud 9, celebrating and happy all the time, because then where's the fun there, right? So we need a little bit of both. So that's the first thing. The next thing I want to touch on is that our brains are wired to make sure we are safe. And so therefore, it looks out for the things that don't go well to protect us. So back in the days when we were hunter and gatherers, that was very, very important. It was important for us when we would go out into nature, chase whatever we need to chase to get food on the table, to be protected because there are some preys out there, right? And so to recognize when we have to seek shelter and protect ourselves, we need that part of our brain that protects us from going into danger. And that's called the amygdala, which is one of the oldest pieces in our brains that still till this day serves a purpose, just not as severe as back in the days. So that's number 2. So we have first, what is actually going on in life? That's just what is happening. Recognizing that's part of life. Then 2, recognizing that there is something in our brain that functions that way. So there isn't necessarily something wrong with us. It's just how we're wired. And that's why my job is here to help you with awareness so that we don't get entangled in these negative thoughts. We don't get entangled in discomfort. Because if we're only and stress, and if we're only in those environments, then our nervous system is on alert all the time. And that's where, for example, news can be very, very tricky because there's always danger in front of us. So the more news we watch, the more danger we see, and the more we feel that there is danger around us. And that might sound like, of course not, that because it's subconscious. right? So it's not that you consciously are aware of all these dangers that you see on TV must happen in my everyday life, but our bodies observe danger in that way and then protects us and keeps that amygdala in our brain activated more often than not. So that's that. So a few years ago, I actually had this I had a meditation session at New Year's, and this image came to my mind: rock versus feathers. Feathers are light, rocks are a little heavier. And I then used this bowl that I have here. Hold on 1 second, I just found another piece I'm gonna use. So I filled this bowl, here we go, with feathers. So there's all these very light feathers in here. They are flying everywhere right now. And imagine those to be your positive thoughts. They're very light. They have no weight to them, right? And then you have this blue, I call it beautiful blue rock, and that would resemble negative thoughts. So look at all these positive thoughts we have, and then look at this one negative thought we have. If I drop it in here, oh my God, look how many positive thoughts I need. If I had less positive thought, it would just hit the glass. So luckily, I have so many positive thoughts in here, feathers, and I can put some rocks in there, and they actually just about touch the ground. So what this demonstrates is just that it is much easier to weigh us down by negative thoughts than it is to have positive thoughts. So in this recent retreat that I was hosting, this question came up. So, and the comparison was like, well, you're always so happy and positive and this and that. Like, how do you do that, right? Maybe the question wasn't exactly like this, but that's how it was worded. And it's a practice. So I don't think it's that I'm positive. It's more that I'm optimistic. So this is one of the differentiation that we can make, that positive, negative, there's the the yin, the yang, the black and white, the on and off, and so on and so forth, and right and wrong, right? And then there's optimistic. Optimistic is, well, I'm not going to describe it as perfectly as Simon Sinek would describe it, because he talked about this very well. But what it definitely is that with optimism, doesn't mean that it's going to be a positive experience. It just means that it's going to have a positive outcome, possibly have a positive outcome. So we're just optimistic. So our demeanor is different. It's not chasing the positive. It's just looking for opportunities for whatever situation we're in to turn out into a more positive outcome with optimism. And so I'll see if I can find that description that Simon Sinek had, because it was really perfect. I just don't have it in mind right now. So that's one of the things. Then in this most recent experience with that soccer game, for example, is they had a game, they were down by at first 3 goals, and then it got closer and closer. And during that time frame, some aspects came to me, or rather people were talking with me about their experience, about this very stressful experience of being behind. And one term that came across is like, oh, we're losing. And in my mind, it's like, well, isn't a win and a loss at the end of a game? So meaning, if we're not at the end of the game, nobody has won or lost at this point. So meaning, win and lose is the same as positive, negative, right? So just because we're in the middle of something where we can see that there is something negative happening, a discomfort is arising, some stress is there, doesn't mean that the outcome has to be that. So I'm using this as an example to demonstrate how we can practice that muscle of having an optimistic outlook versus just be positive, right? Because just being positive just means I'm replacing the negative with something positive. Optimism, on the other hand, is taking the negative, looking at it from a different angle, and create a different perspective around it and create a positive outcome with an optimistic demeanor. So my sense of stress, my sense of worry becomes less because I have increased optimism. Anyway, I'm not going to go too much into this because I really wish I had that Simon Sinek sentence there, because that would help it tremendous for you to understand what I mean with optimism. But I'll just keep it simple with positive, negative. So we'll stay there. So by reframing it, by saying we're not losing, we're just behind, releases some stress. Logically, we can obviously say, well, it's the same thing, but it's not. Some very minor changes in our language, some minor ways of looking at something, expanding our perspectives can make a tremendous difference in how our amygdala is responding, meaning how we're feeling. And so all of those parts are connected to one another. And so instead of staying stuck in how something should be just because of how we're feeling in that moment, or rather how we're feeling that this can turn out to be, not that it should be that way, but with the discomfort that I'm feeling in this moment, I might have an expectation or a certain outlook on how it could turn out, which, if it is a discomforting experience, that the outcome must be negative, right? So the practice is in the moment. As I always talk about this, is that it's all about being present in the moment. So if I'm not losing the game just yet, I'm just behind, it can help me regain some strength and be in a more optimistic outlook and still push. Because the moment that I think I lost already, something in my body can happen that it won't push as hard, that it already gave up, that it already felt like I'm not going to get that. But if I'm looking at it, I'm just behind, meaning I can still make it, then guess what? And they did score, and they did maybe not win, but they made it even. So with that said, it's all about perspectives. And if you are one of those that have more the tendency to stay in the discomforting negative experience, maybe just take a deep breath. Maybe just look at it from a different angle and see, how else could I look at the situation? What's the other perspective of it? It's not just turning it upside down. And that's why it's hard for me to tell you exactly what to do and how to do it and how I keep my demeanor in an optimistic way. It's something I've done all my life. My mom was like this. And I think even my dad had some sort of that input. And so the more we surround ourselves with people that are that way, that can maybe help us see things from a different angle, the easier it becomes for us to practice this and also make it be part of who we are. And so, yes, let me know how you're feeling about negative thoughts, positive thoughts. And obviously, it's not just about thoughts. It's about how we look at life, how we cope with things that are a little bit more stressful or things that we don't like. The weather is another great example that we didn't get into, like sunny days versus rainy days, and then the rainbow in between. That creates a beautiful visionary and vision. And so with that said, I hope that this little glimpse of having these feathers and the rocks, explaining a little bit about how our brain works, and also some examples from our lives, that this can help you look at your life a little bit more bright and optimistic. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next Wednesday. All right, take care.